Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
All right, you guys, welcome to the show in true rapid reaction form. Just going to go live. Really anxious to get to your comments, questions, takes on this game. The Seahawks, of course, dropped to 3-1 tonight. Mike Macdonald's first loss as head coach, a 42-29 shootout that up until the last few minutes of the game, as much as there were moments throughout the game where we thought, well, that might be the final blow. I think I even tweeted out a couple times. I know I wasn't alone. Well, now it's over. It wasn't. And the Seahawks continued to hang around and go toe-to-toe with the Detroit Lions in this game in a raucous atmosphere at Ford Field against a very, very good football team, severely undermanned on defense. The key points today. Let's just get right into it. Another shootout, fourth straight year these teams have put up a high-scoring affair. If anyone bet the under on this game, you probably shouldn't ever bet, ever again. Jared Goff was perfect tonight. Actually perfect. Literally perfect. Not a single pass hit the turf. In fact, I think one of the announcers at the end of the game put it well. He had more touchdown catches in this game than he had incompletions. Outstanding game for him. We'll get into that a little bit. Near perfect Geno. Really unfortunate at the end. He throws a pick on the last play, desperation, just trying to make something happen in the end zone. One of those games where it's unfortunate he didn't have more touchdown passes. He put up a lot of yards, came up unless they've updated the official stats, came up 1 yard shy of his first 400-yard game ever, and had to do it in the first half when, once again, the Seahawks couldn't get anything going in the rushing game. Didn't do that until the second half. We'll get into that a little bit as well. They were outmanned on defense with Jerome Baker being inactive tonight. That made 5 starters in their front 7 out. And as much as I tried to rationalize throughout the week that they would still be able to compete, and they did, without those guys, it severely limited what they can do in trying to slow down that very explosive offense. Was Mike Macdonald out-coached, in particular by Ben Johnson tonight? I don't want to get too negative because, but it's a question worth asking. I think there were some opportunities in the game to take control of a couple of circumstances, and there were some decisions that I didn't like. And maybe it's unfair to call it Mike Macdonald. Maybe those issues are a little bit more with the offensive play caller at certain points during the game tonight. But I think it's at least worth discussing. And then, of course, try to put a positive spin on it, because I think there are a lot of positive takeaways out of this game, and we'll get into those as well. Let's get right to some of your comments and questions, if we can, because I should be able to get all of these now, despite whether you're watching on Twitter or YouTube, trying something a little different here. So I should be able to put some things up on the screen. I just want to get into how you guys are all feeling about this coming into week 4 with a tough stretch in 3 games in 10 days, 3 games in 11 days that we're facing. Here we go. I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. Thoughts? It's nice to hear Geno finally get some of the credit he deserves from the broadcast team. Lions are what the Seahawks want to be. Hopefully we can get there with another good offseason. I tweeted something very similar at a certain point late in the game, that the Lions are what the Seahawks want to be. And some people disagreed with that, got some pushback, called Detroit a finesse team, pointed out once again all the injuries the Seahawks had on defense. What I meant by that is they're able to dictate terms at certain points along the way. And yeah, they still, as much as they've taken some steps on defense, they still don't look any closer to being the type of dominant defense that you want if you fancy yourself a legitimate Super Bowl contender. They're still a team that can score 1 million points, but has trouble stopping other teams, as evidenced tonight. For the 3rd straight year, Geno Smith goes into Ford Field and treats it like a home field. Even the last 2 years before this, over 320 yards passing and 2 touchdowns in each game. And he was outstanding again tonight. pretty much was able to get completions at will almost anytime he wanted them. And some of them deep down the field, really tried to take advantage of some of those issues that the Lions have had on the back end in coverage. But primarily I was talking about how in key moments of the game and in a very balanced way throughout the game, they are able to run the football physically and effectively. And in particular with inside runs. And it's not just David Montgomery. It was pointed out on the telecast tonight, and there were some good examples that Jahmyr Gibbs is more than just, kind of the lightning to David Montgomery's thunder. He can be a physical running back too, and in fact, gain some tough yards late in the game when the Lions needed to hang on to the football. First half, the run game was once again non-existent, and once again, the game plan right out of the gate seemed to be, we're just going to throw it all over the yard. I don't want to get too heavily into that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's see. And I'm just doing these blind, right? I just like to react to them as I see them rather than picking and choosing. I don't normally blame the refs, says Pauly704. They're grabbing on every route. Another game full of penalties. Let me pull up the game stats so we can look at some of this as we go through. Penalties, Seahawks with 9 for 70 yards, 12 for 101 for the Lions. And one of them was an absolute crusher. Late in the game, the Seahawks are driving. Geno's doing his thing again. They're going down the field, chance to cut it to a 1-score game. And they go for it on 4th and 3 with 9 minutes left. Easy little play. Geno, little half rollout to JSN, looked a lot like the play that won it in overtime last year, the walk-off throw to Tyler Lockett at the pylon. There was a flag, ironically enough, offensive pass interference on Tyler Lockett. And they pointed out on the telecast, it was an easily avoidable penalty where Lockett should know this, the grizzled veteran that he is. It wasn't that he made contact with the defender. It's that he appeared to be blocking as if it was a run play downfield. If he just made it look more like he's trying to run a route or like he's losing his balance or whatever, he runs into the defender, probably isn't called. And the Seahawks maintained possession there. And the way things were going, they might go down and score, and this is a whole different ballgame. So really, really unfortunate. But yeah, I don't know what's happening. Is this league-wide? It'd be interesting to see some of the analytics. Are we seeing more penalties league-wide? Are they trying to call it tighter? Or is this a case, as it is with so many other aspects of the game in the last couple of years, of teams having to show up on game day and play full speed when they don't ever get to replicate game conditions in practice anymore because of the limitations? I don't know. But that particular penalty was a killer. Paulie also says backup lineman got pushed around all game, both sides of the ball. All right, let's get into this. So if you watch the show this week, and especially in a couple of shows I did with some Detroit Lions content creators, and today on Twitter, I put it out there that, look, when you think back to when they played last year in Detroit, Seahawks didn't have Leonard Williams yet, hadn't acquired him yet, didn't have Byron Murphy then. They were playing with Jaron Reed, Mario Edwards, Derek Hall. Boye Mafe was out of that game, but Uchenna Nwosu was in. And their depth wasn't as good. Their depth was Cameron Young and Tyreek Smith. So I tried to make the argument this year that you still have those top four. You still have Jaron Reed. You still have Derek Hall. But instead, now we're talking about Jonathan Hankins, right? We're talking about an improved Derek Hall and some of the other guys that they subbed in there. Miles Adams, he played in that game last year as well. I thought there was an opportunity to be good enough to get the occasional pressure with McDonald emptying his playbook a little bit more than he had up until this point through the first 3 weeks. getting some pressure on Goff. The numbers are pretty stark in his career. When pressured, he's not as good. Maybe force a turnover or two and rely on the back end. Let those guys cover, maybe play a little more man-to-man than normal, maybe get a turnover. That didn't happen at all. In fact, I think the thing we're all going to be looking at as the All-22 tape comes out from this one is what happened in coverage. Because there were a number of big plays, just not enough contested catches, nothing close to an interception. The Seahawks still, through 4 games, just not taking the ball away. They have the 2 picks. Week 1 against Bo Nix, both of those were rookies, a rookie in his first game on the road, kind of throwing it to you. Anyway, they're not taking the ball away. And certainly in the first half, they got pushed around inside, and the Lions were able to open big running lanes for David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. And it just, again, dictated terms. It just set the tone early. And so, not only on their side of the ball are the Seahawks not able to do that. In the first half, there just weren't any holes. But again, Ryan Grubb didn't even take shots at running the football in the first half. I think there was only 1 carry in the first quarter. Maybe it was 2. I think 1 was coming out of the break in the second quarter. They got it going a little bit in the second half. It'll be interesting to go back and rewatch the game again, how much of that was attributed to Detroit kind of softening things and playing a little more conservative on the back end and being willing to give up some runs. But I do feel like they were a little more physical and they were a little bit more consistent with the run game, reminiscent of the Denver game when they took over a little bit in the second half. But we need to see better, certainly. And I don't want to make any broad statements. I want to save that kind of till the end. But obviously, as much as and I know I'm not the only one, tried to rationalize that there's a way that this defense could have been effective enough to give the Seahawks offense a chance to pull out a win in this game. They just not having Leonard Williams, not having Byron Murphy, your best 2 defensive tackles. Let's just start there. First of all, what those 2 guys are capable of doing that Jonathan Hankins really isn't, that Jaron Reed at this point of his career really isn't, is penetrate. Those guys are capable of beating a block, sometimes even beating a double team, or at least commanding a double team so the other one can get free and freeing things up to get to the quarterback in inside pressure, collapsing the pocket, making things easier for Draymond Jones to use his quickness to do that as well. That just wasn't there. And it shrinks the margin for error so much that the only way to be effective in run defense is to basically be gap perfect. And they certainly weren't. The Legion of Room lost us this game. Witherspoon got humbled. Shaggy do. There was one play, the Jameson Williams play, obviously, where he was the guy that got picked on, but was that completely his fault? Because when they did show the high angle of the replay of that, it looked like Witherspoon was left all alone on an island with Amon-Ra St. Brown coming over on a crosser and Jameson Williams ending up getting the ball, 70-yard touchdown that really kind of turned the momentum of the game around after the Seahawks had pulled some of that back. That's a coverage break. That's a bust in coverage. That's a mistake on the back end with Mike McDonald adding dirty, Leslie Frazier. What happened there? Give credit. Again, that's why, when it points to coaching, like Ben Johnson, which, one of the storylines not really talked about in this game is, this was Mike McDonald, the Seahawks' first choice for head coach, and they ended up getting the guy they wanted, going up against the guy that might have been their second choice in Ben Johnson. Obviously was interviewed there near the end. And Ben Johnson's been getting some criticism from Lions fans, in particular in that Buccaneers game, which they lost at home, for his play calling. And so, I thought he had a great plan today, certainly. And I thought this game was going to come down to who could take advantage of the other team's weakness the most. The Seahawks, obviously, from the very first play of the game, tried to pick on a secondary that has been porous for the Lions. And we're also down now their best defensive back in Brian Branch, and Melifonu was out as well. Like, their two best safeties out of this game. And Terrion Arnold, the rookie out of Alabama, has all sorts of issues. Had him again tonight. Carlton Davis even had struggled in coverage. The veteran they brought in free agency, although I thought it was curious early in this game that the game plan obviously was intent on picking on Davis, who was covering Metcalf for most of the first half. I couldn't really tell if he was shadowing or not, if it just worked out that way, instead of picking on Arnold in the passing game. Now, in the second half, Arnold really made some mistakes. His penchant for grabbing and holding really came through. There were a lot of penalties called on him. And so I wouldn't put that all on Witherspoon. Now, there was one very crucial play in this game that I think it was Witherspoon, the David Montgomery run, the beast mode, reminiscent Marshawn Lynch type run that I thought really turned that game around in the second half when it looked like the Seahawks had kind of grabbed some momentum back and they were keeping it close. They were moving it on offense. And Witherspoon had Montgomery dead to rights in the flat and hit him with a lot of violence and bounced off of him and missed the tackle. He wasn't the only one that missed tackle on that play, but he should have, that play I think should have been a loss of yardage. So yeah, at Witherspoon's NFL debut came last year in Detroit. He got beat for a touchdown then, maybe not his favorite place to play. But I just wonder what was going on in the back end in coverage there, and I wouldn't put that all on Witherspoon. I thought we were going to see more man-to-man coverage, and it looked to me like the Lions, who are known for playing a lot of aggressive man, that's what Aaron Glenn likes to do, may have played more zone in this game. It seemed to me like when the Seahawks would shift or go into motion that they didn't carry defenders with them as much as maybe they were expecting to see from the Lions. Corey Potter, I got to say, I feel better about the loss than I have some of our wins. Offense showed they can overcome our line's deficiencies, and Ryan Grubb is a breath of fresh air with more D-line. Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about the positives to come out of this game. But I had some real issues. I go back over my notes here with Grubb. First of all, the first quarter, first half, just coming out with the intent of opening the offense and throwing the ball all over the yard instead of even trying to establish a running game. And it wasn't even that they tried to give the appearance they were going to run the football. A lot of empty backfield stuff, especially in the red zone. Just didn't love that start to the game. And late in the game, go back to my notes here. When they were in the red zone, they were inside the 5. It was the time when they ended up having to go for it on, where am I here? So many notes. Anyway, I can't find the exact specifics. I guess I could go to the play chart. I just don't. I don't like dead air. It's not entertaining for you guys, or certainly those of you who are just listening on audio after the fact, to listen to me search for stats. But it was red zone, and they did it again late in the game when they had the ball down there with like 3 minutes left, and took 4 cracks at it from inside the 5 and didn't run the football once and went empty a couple of times. And just, to me, that just takes away. They even ran it from the 1 once and went shotgun. Like, where's the under center stuff? Where's the play action stuff? I'm not saying Grubb called a bad game. Certainly the pass game was effective enough, and there were some really cool calls in there. There was one time late in the game where I tweeted, I think on that last drive, I'd like to see the little half rollout from Geno here. That seems to work. And they did on the next play. The result wasn't great, but made me look good anyway for my prediction. But yeah, I think overall, I think the adjustments in the second half in the running game certainly helped. We've seen that a couple of times. I think one of the things that I've heaped the most praise upon Grubb for are his in-game adjustments, not just halftime adjustments, but throughout the game. I also felt like for the most part, we saw him again. I like the personnel usage at first glance, watching it live. He spreads the ball around. He tries to stress the defense at every level of the field, trying to find that weakness. He clearly favors targeting DK Metcalf, and JSN still seems to be a distant second in the pecking order. Now let's see if the stats back up that impression. Looking at the official stats here, Geno Smith took that sack at the very end of the game. So he ends up with 395 yards, not 399. He goes 38 out of 56. I believe they said on the telecast at the end, those were career highs in attempts and completions. Just the one touchdown, the one pick at the end, took 3 sacks. Although it was just 1 sack up until late in the fourth quarter. He did a really good job managing the pocket. But target share. Okay. This is why stats matter. I was wrong. DK Metcalf, well, I was wrong in that I thought JSN was maybe a distant second. Nope. DK had 12 targets, caught 7 balls for 104 yards. JSN, 12 targets, 8 catches, 51 yards, a long of 11, still just being used in that short passing game. I still do think we're going to reach a point where he's used more downfield. Tyler Lockett had 9 targets in this one. And then the 2 running backs targeted a total of 10 times out of the backfield. That's good to see. Jake Bobo, 3 catches on 3 targets today. His most extensive action in the passing game so far this season. And then cool to see A.J. Barner get his first NFL touchdown. He had 2 catches today on 2 targets for 27 yards and the 18-yard touchdown. That was really cool. Noah Fant, 2 targets as well. Laviska Shenault had a little tunnel screen on the inside for a big gain of 18 yards in the second half. And then Pharaoh Brown, 2 targets. One of them was a drop, although it looked like the ball was tipped. So spreading the ball around, using his personnel. Kenneth Walker, 12 carries for 80 yards and 3 touchdowns in this one, including a spectacular one. Once again, nothing there on the inside, bouncing it out to the outside. Ryan Grubb seemed really intent in the first half on alternating those guys. In fact, when he went to Zach Charbonnet on the second drive, I thought maybe Walker's not as healthy as we hope he is. But then as the game went along, you could see that clearly that was an effort on their part to just not only preserve him and take it easy on him coming back from the injury, but also maybe a reward and an acknowledgement for how good Zach Charbonnet has been in his absence. At least he was last week. He only ends up with 2 carries, 15 yards. The Seahawks with 133 yards rushing on the game, but 38 of those were Geno Smith, so 95 from the running backs. Surprisingly, this is interesting to me. Again, this is why these rapid reactions are kind of fun. Sometimes I take a moment and write some notes and get some stats together. Perception doesn't always match reality, or reality doesn't always match perception. This happens sometimes also when coming home from seeing the game live and then hopping on here with you guys and reacting to it. The Lions with just 116 yards rushing in this one. It's just that they were big runs. They were key runs and key moments. They were physical. They were kind of impose your will type runs. 14 carries for 78 yards for Jahmyr Gibbs. David Montgomery, 12 carries, 40 yards. Gibbs, 2 touchdowns, and Montgomery 1. Really, the key to this game was 2 things, I think, outside of the injuries on defense for Seattle. The turnover by DK Metcalf on their second drive cannot be understated. You know, the Seahawks come out on their very first drive of this game and get a really dynamic and impressive 3-and-out. Ends in a big sack of Jared Goff. And we thought, okay, here we go, especially given that the Lions won the toss and elected to receive, meaning the Seahawks were going to get the ball to start the second half. So they come out and they get a 3-and-out. And then the fumble from DK Metcalf, and I love the effort. Right? And it's a hell of a play by Jack Campbell, a guy that really loved in the draft last year. We were looking for linebackers. That was a guy that I studied pretty hard. It's kind of a throwback, blue collar, really physical, tough player. Knocks the ball out, just before DK's knee is down. So then we end up being down 2 scores early instead of just 1, and we kind of were playing catch up the rest of the game. And by the time we got it going, you're just behind the 8 ball. So I thought that was a key. And then the fact that, Jared Goff was as effective as he was, that we just couldn't get any pressure on him. And when we did, he was better creatively and better on the move than we're used to seeing from him. One play in particular in the first half where it looked like it was going to be a sack. We don't finish the play. He spins out of it, almost a Russell Wilson-esque type play, makes a big completion down the field. That was certainly big for them. Let's get back to your comments and questions. Let's see. We see a lot of this after games like this. Yeah, I thought that was a sneaky, really unfortunate play where the Seahawks late, they score, they go for 2, and DK comes down with the ball, but they call him, or they call pass interference on the Lions, and then we don't score from the 1. But it looked like, on review, they even came out of the commercial break and they brought in their rules expert and they said, hey, that looked like it could have been a catch. At least it was close enough that I don't know if we could have challenged it, but it's a scoring play, so it should have been reviewed automatically, right? So that's unfortunate. Goes on to say offense looks much different under Grubb. It sure does. Lane Smith, defensive Sean McVay is what they said. How does Sean McVay's offense look without Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Steve Avila, Dotson, Havenstein, right? Not as good. They're 1-3. Doesn't look like a Sean McVay offense, does it? Even with a healthy Matt Stafford. Tough to judge Mike Macdonald and his scheme in this game, missing 5 of his horses up front. Boye Mafe and Uchenna Nwosu coming off the edge. Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy on the inside. Jerome Baker. Although watching it live, thought the inside linebackers played pretty well. But, go back and watch it again, and maybe there's some run fits there that were missed that Jerome Baker would have been in on. So I don't know if he was as significant of a loss there. But give Mike Macdonald those 4 dudes, and you might have a whole different story, right? So let's just, let's pump the brakes. Also keep in mind that his first half season in Baltimore, defense wasn't very good. Took half a season for things to really click in there his first year in Baltimore. And it really wasn't until the trade deadline they acquired Roquan Smith that things did start to click. So let's not be too hasty. It's going to take some time, right? It always was going to take a little bit of time. Let's see. Yeah. Lyle McNair, defense needs to make some turnovers. It's the only thing we need to improve on. It's not the only thing. We need to improve tackling for sure. There were several times, again, in the game today where we had a chance to make tackles at or near or behind the line of scrimmage, and we missed. There were some sack opportunities that we missed. That's got to get better. So not the only thing. But yeah, this team isn't taking the ball away yet. Again, maybe just keep pounding this hammer. Maybe tonight that was going to be tough to do without those horses up front. But that's got to turn. I mean, Detroit's facing the same thing. They got two turnovers because you get the desperation interception at the end in the end zone. But they get the takeaway. But I think that only brought them back to even. I think they were -1, just like the Seahawks coming into this game. I could be wrong. But they're not where they want to be with turnovers either. So many wide open blown coverages. Yeah, we're going to have to look at that. And, I'm sure you're going to hear McDonald talk about that after the game. There's some opportunities here to teach, some opportunities to learn. Certainly the Jameson Williams 70-yard touchdown was a blown coverage, clearly. The last touchdown, the Amon-Ra St. Brown toe tapper on the sideline, looked like a blown coverage also. Kobe Bryant was closest, but he was a good 3 yards away from St. Brown, it looked like. So how do you let their best receiver, a guy who should be the focal point of your offense, how do you let him go uncovered like that? So yeah, those things need to be cleaned up. Absolutely. I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. Responding to Lane Smith, missing half his starting defense to include his defensive quarterback, Julian Love, partway through the game. Don't have any updates on Love's injury. He did have to leave the game the second half and did not come back. I think he's the only injury out of this game. That's a good thing. We'll talk about injuries here in a little bit. Let's see. Pretentious Cameron with the super thanks. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the support for the channel. By the way, all the different ways you can support the channel are always down below in the description. Although this one live stream, I usually have to go back and edit the description, so we'll check that out. But you can look for Buy Me a Coffee down below. You can do a super thanks or a super like, just like Pretentious Cameron did. Really appreciate that. Or you can just subscribe to the channel, give a thumbs up to the video, share it. That's the best way to support me in the channel. Geno proving on the national stage that he's a great QB. I better not hear any Seahawks fans still calling for Howell to start. Geno is elite. I think there's a couple of big storylines. I told you I'd talk about the positives coming out of this game, and that's one of them. I don't know what happened, but a switch got flipped with Geno about halfway through that last season. If you go back and look at his last 7 starts last year, he was outstanding. One of the best quarterbacks in the league statistically the last 7 games. You know, I think there's been this prevailing storyline, and maybe it's a little bit of lazy analysis, and a lot of it comes from outside. You know, people that aren't watching the Seahawks week in, week out, that aren't as passionate about it as we are, and that don't watch it as closely as we are, as consistently as we do. But that he, 22, he won comeback player of the year, but it was mostly fueled by a really good start. And then he didn't play as well in the second half. The league kind of adjusted to him, right? That was the narrative. Last year got off to a poor start, finished strongly. I think even John Schneider in the offseason or at the end of the season said, if you could put those 2 seasons together or those 2 halves together. But something happened before those 7 games. He started getting rid of the ball quicker. His pocket management and pocket movement skills seemed to really advance. He just seemed to see the field better. Remember the game at Cincinnati last year where he had multiple instances. I did a whole show on it with all 22, showing how many long touchdown plays were wide open and he just didn't see them. The game slowed down for him second half of last season. And then this year, it just seemed to have even taken another step. And how much of that has to do with the pairing of he and Ryan Grubb and how comfortable he is in this offense, or just the evolution, his development, his next step of the game really slowing down for him. He's still going to make an ill-advised throw or be a little overly aggressive from time to time. But every time he drops back to pass now, I don't have any fear. I've been on the Geno bandwagon for a good long while now, and kind of got tired in the offseason of debating people over it. But these first 4 games, when it's not as extreme as it was last year and the year before, but this still applies. He's having to shoulder the load. The running game's been inconsistent. We haven't seen a game yet where we've come out from the opening kickoff and established the ability to run the football. We haven't had a game yet where we've been able to put the opposing defense on their heels because they have to come up and be physical and take on Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. Teams are preparing to face us in coverage. They're preparing their game plan around trying to stop Geno, and they're not able to. And we've seen now 4 weeks in, sometimes things become a little clear. Denver Broncos are a really good defense. They just completely shut down the New York Jets and a certain guy named Aaron Rodgers. And yet Geno, for the most part, shredded them, shredded the Patriots, played great last week, and played great tonight. Like, kept them in this game despite all the things that were going wrong. He had to have flashbacks. He had to be having PTSD and asking himself, my goodness, like, I thought we were done with this. But he kept coming back. And even at the end of the game, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman said, and they weren't just talking about Geno, but Joe Buck said, they showed me something. Like, this team came into, and let's not minimize this either, an incredible atmosphere. That game looked and sounded and felt like prime CenturyLink Field in 2013, 2014, 2015. That kind of atmosphere. You think about Thursday night football games during that time, Sunday night football, night games against the Niners, the NFC Championship game against the Niners, like that kind of intensity from that crowd. And the Seahawks never seemed rattled by it. Even on defense, they didn't seem rattled. They just were outmanned. But certainly on offense, there is a calmness and a confidence in the way they go about things, and that comes from Geno. Anyone who looks at Geno Smith now, whether you just look at the highlights or you watch SportsCenter or you're more into it than that, and you look at the All-22 or you watch full games, and says they don't think Geno Smith can play, that he's mid, that you can't win with him, or that they do the lazy thing and they just say, hasn't ever won a playoff game. They just don't know ball. With all the little things we've seen through 4 weeks that need to improve for this team to really be a legitimate contender, quarterback is not one of them. And he's the glue. And you can at least go in, week out, and have a pretty high level of confidence that your quarterback's going to be able to get some things done. Now they just need to improve the things around him. Also, I have to say that the pass protection for the most part today was pretty consistently manageable. It was okay. First half, it was really good. Hutchinson started to get going in the second half when he could really pin his ears back. But for the most part, Geno had time. And it wasn't, in his it'd be interesting to see what his average time to throw was in this game, because it wasn't like he was just getting rid of the ball super quick on every drop back. He was pumping a couple of times, holding it, taking his time. He had to move out of the pocket a couple of times, but he's so good at that and it's sensing that. I thought the offensive line took a step forward in pass protection today against, one of the premier pass rushers in the league. That's a positive. The run blocking, it'll be interesting to watch the tape of the first half compared to the second half. How many of those runs were blocked well versus how many of them were just Ken Walker being dynamic. I will say this, another hats off to AJ Barner after he had his second catch in the second half, the one where he tried to hurdle the defender. I think he got a first down on that play, came back on the very next play and had an outstanding block to spring. Was it Walker or Charbonnet on a really good run? It was Charbonnet. Came right back, got a first down, came right back, got the key block that sprang Charbonnet on an 11-yard run. So back-to-back first downs there. AJ Barner has really risen up the depth chart. He was in there. The Seahawks came out in the second half in 12 personnel, and it was Barner out there as one of the two tight ends. Really cool to see. St. Hazard, all in all, pretty good game. Even if it was a trap game, we'll get right against the Giants and hopefully healthy, ready to go against the Niners. Yeah, I'm sure the Seahawks were looking past the Lions because of that big Giants matchup on Sunday. Yeah, this wasn't unless you just mean it was a trap game in the sense that we were missing all those guys on defense, because certainly they weren't looking past this game. Seahawks thought the same thing about this game. I guarantee you their players thought the same thing about this game as we all did, especially as the naysayers and the outside onlookers and analysts did, that like, okay, let's see how they do now on the road against a really good team, because we haven't given them much credit for what they did in going 3-0. So yeah. Just couldn't get any pressure on Goff tonight, but missing 3 of their best defensive linemen. I just didn't think they had the manpower to stop Detroit. From Traveler and Ryder. Yeah, again, the margin for error was just so narrow. They had to play almost perfect, and obviously they didn't. Let's go through some of these. They kept using stretch plays and found holes in between the zones. Most of the blown coverages was from crossers that weren't passed off to the next defender. Okay, so the zone defense needs to be corrected. And I keep going back to a podcast appearance from Leslie Frazier in the offseason when he was on Move the Sticks with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks, where he talked about the connectedness of the back end to the front end, and everyone just kind of knowing how it all fits together and where you're supposed to be. That wasn't tested the first 3 weeks. And so if you want to say that, they're a fraud or they weren't as good as they appeared, as their record appeared to be, I think the one aspect of the game that you can make that point most clearly is they weren't tested by good quarterbacks. And so you're just not going to sharpen your blade as well when you're facing Bo Nix in his first start on the road. Then you're facing Jacoby Brissett, who's a journeyman and just isn't going to hurt you down the field in the vertical passing game. And then you're facing, Skylar Thompson, and then Tim Boyle against the Dolphins instead of Tua. Almost wish they had faced Tua last week, a healthy Tua Tagovailoa. Maybe would have helped that defense learn some lessons and prepare for this game. But also maybe then you're 2-2 now instead of 3-1. So at the end of the day, being 3-1 is not so bad. The Virginia Seahawks, why can't we split running back times? I get that Zach is slower to start, but is a bruiser. I was encouraged early in the second half when they came out and they ran. They came out in 2 backs. They had Charbonnet and Walker out there, and they ran on the first play of the second half. I don't know how much of that we saw the rest of the half, but I'd like to see more of that. Get them both out there. I think it would really stress the defense. No pressure on the QB. We'll have any secondary looking stupid. The Lions would not have scored 40 if our D-line was healthy from SL Hazard. That is a valid argument. Yeah, Noah says there were moments on short yard downs where Kenneth Walker would bounce it out instead of hitting the hole like Charbonnet would. That's why, man, if you can really dial in and find a way to use both those guys on a consistent basis, imagine how effective that could be, just like the Lions do, right? Again, let's go back to the box score and let's compare. Kenneth Walker, 12 carries for 80 yards. Zach Charbonnet, 2 carries for 15. Seems like he had more than that, right? But he caught 5 balls too. Charbonnet did. Caught 5 balls for 39 yards. And Walker also caught 4 for 36. But only 14 combined carries with 12 of them going to Walker. Gibbs, 14 carries, 78 yards. Montgomery, 12 carries, 40 yards. If you can find a way to dial that in better so that teams don't know which way you're going to attack them or with who you're going to attack them. Also reminds me of, Carolina Panthers, Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams. Remember that combo? They had the 1 year in particular where I think combined they ran for almost 2,000 yards. And it was just so hard to prepare for them. Would like to see more of that. I do love this. Shout out to Derek Hall, had another sack with the, we all learned something tonight. We learned that you cannot get called for a horse collar tackle when the quarterback is in the pocket. That's legal. Didn't know that. That's cool. We all learned that. But Aiden with looked like Lawrence Taylor with that one-handed sack on Goff. This is what I saw on tape from Hall at Auburn coming out of college. Not the twitchy, beat you around the edge, bendy type of pass rush. Although he did have a rep like that on tape last week against the Dolphins for one of his 2 sacks. But the single arm bull rush, he's so good at that. And he did that on this one and beat, I think he beat Taylor Decker on that play. I thought it was Sewell at first because I thought they had moved Sewell to left tackle, but he's still playing right tackle and Decker at left. I think it was Taylor Decker that came against. No slouch. One of the better tackles in the NFC. Okay. There's always a couple of these. Shouldn't have got rid of Pete. That McDonald defense isn't really what we hoped for. From Liberty or Death, 1775. I'm just going to let that one sit there. I'll let you guys take that one on. I was very disappointed by how out of sorts. I'm going to stop putting these up because here's why. McVirus 6185 says it need to get healthy and create turnovers. And I think those two things will come hand in hand. If the Seahawks had Byron Murphy, Leonard Williams, Uchenna Nwosu, Boye Mafe healthy and out there, and Jerome Baker even, and they put up that much yardage and that many points, okay, then you could say, well, what's happening here with the scheme? What's happening with this execution? We heard this coaching staff was so great at teaching, and pump the brakes. Pump the brakes. A pressured Jared Goff is much less effective than a non-pressured one. He doesn't go 17 out of 17, or what was it tonight? 18 out of 18. If all those guys are in, I guarantee it. There's always going to be some overreaction, right? We're passionate. Someone accused me on Twitter tonight of being hormonal in reference to how I tweet during games versus how I talk to you about this here. It's one of the things I love about this outlet. I usually am able to gather myself before I hit record and approach this with a much more, what do I say on my channel, is kind of a mission statement, balanced, thoughtful analysis. It's a little harder during games, especially the way it started. You know, we go out and get the 3 and out. We're moving the ball. They score a touchdown. You think we can get this. And you get a little excited. You start to think about what could be. But look, the sky isn't falling. It's not the end of the world. It's not doomsday. If any of you were offered 3-1 to start the season, no matter how they got there, would you have taken it? Hell yes, you would have. And if you say no, I expected them to go 4-0, 5-0 to start the season, you're lying. You're either lying or you just are so overly optimistic that you can't really be taken seriously. You take 3-1. Also, I continue to keep hammering away at this, and I will throughout the season. Greg Bell on this show, right? Esteemed beat writer, been covering the Seahawks for a long time. One of the most thoughtful and balanced reporters out there. Not afraid to be hard on the team. Not afraid to criticize. Calls it like he sees it. Said on this show a few weeks ago, this roster has the makings of a good team. This coaching staff has the makings of a good coaching staff. This team's going to be a lot better the second half of this in November than they are in September. That's reality. So let's pump the brakes on some of the overly hyperbolic sky is falling, woe is me criticism until we see a bigger sample size with all their horses. This will be interesting. Just reading the first line here. Brandon Jana. Listening to Scott Van Pelt and Ryan Clark talk now, thought the exact same thing. BS OPI call on Lockett. That's another game changer. Bad call. Hawks played well given the context entering the game. They had a bunch of calls go against them too, and some of them were really ticky-tack as well. Those go both ways. Let's see. I think, we've gotten the gist. Let's go to the very end. Let's get some of the newer comments, and then we'll work our way back. Oh, let me throw this in here. Jayanth, am I saying that right? Kumar with a super thanks. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Sheil Kapata reports that the 38 first downs are the most by any team in the past 10 years. Let's get to a positive, shall we? And more than one positive. And again, reality sometimes is different than perception. If I told you that these two teams, that one had 516 yards in total yards and one had 389, like the Lions had 389 yards. It's not great, but it's not sky is falling, end of the world stuff. It felt worse than maybe it was because it came at the explosive plays. I guarantee it's probably already happened that Mike McDonald has already talked about or is talking about currently explosive plays. You have to limit the explosive plays, which are, long runs, long passes. That's where that came in. Let's go back and look at those numbers. They averaged, yards per play, 7.8. That's too much. But look at this. Seahawks, 38 first downs, as Jayanth noted, to 21 for the Lions. 22 passing first downs, 10 rushing first downs. Third down efficiency, 5 out of 10. Lions, 3 out of 6. That may be the key to this game. Going into the game, Jared Goff said it, Dan Campbell said it. We need to stay out of third downs because that's when Mike McDonald can really dial up his exotic and creative pressures. They did that. In 50 total plays, they only faced third down 6 times. And Seahawks held them to 50%. It's not outstanding, but it's not bad either. Conversely, on offense, 5 out of 10. And I think at one point, they were 4 out of their first 4. Were they not? I think they were 4 out of 4 on third down to start the game. So that means they went 1 for their next 6. That's huge. That's really huge. The Seahawks ran 78 total plays to 50 for Detroit. Again, 516 yards to 389. On the same number of drives, Seahawks 6.6 yards per play to 7.8 for Detroit. Rushing, Seattle outrushed Detroit, 133 yards to 116. Most of that in the second half. If you take away 2 or 3 plays in this game, it goes right down to the wire. If you take away the DK turnover, and then, a lot of you have expressed some frustration here with some of the calls. So let's say you take away the OPI call on Lockett on the 4th down conversion. Seahawks were in this game to the very end, and we're talking about 2 or 3 plays, and we had 5 of our 7 front 7 defensive starters out of this game. This is a still mostly young team at some key spots, new coaching staff, first time playing an opponent this good on the road in that atmosphere, in that environment, and they hung with them. And they had a shot. It's hard to look at this game and come away feeling terrible. Unless you're just one of those people that just cannot handle a loss no matter how. And I get that because growing up with some really, really bad Seahawk teams, losses would ruin me for the week. Even though I didn't know at the time that was a really irrational thing. Let's see. This will be interesting. If this was Pete and Shane Waldron calling plays, the score probably would have been 50-14. There you go. Dan, would you like to see some of those Lockett targets go to JSN? Lockett is getting blanketed more and more. It feels like. Love the show. Thank you, Lane Smith. I don't know. JSN had 12 targets today to 12 for Metcalf. It's tough for me to argue with that kind of target share. I thought the ball was spread around pretty appropriately. It's hard, again, without watching the tape, it's hard to have issue with how Geno distributed the ball in this one. Let's see what we got. Hey, Dave, one of the most consistent and generous contributors to the program. Couple of super thanks. Thank you so much. This is just a reset and refocus moment. We'll be back and maybe see these guys again in the postseason. I think that's a really interesting point. I think I tweeted that at some point during the game. I would love to see these guys again with both of us healthy. I want Ragnow in for them too, and Branch. And we'll have all of our guys on defense back. This was a really good test. And I'm not so sure that the Seahawks flunked it. Just because you lose the game doesn't mean you flunked the test. This is a long season, a long process. Did any of us expect them after 4 games to be a slam dunk, no-brainer, no doubt Super Bowl contender? No. I like where this team is. Even after the loss. Let's see. All right. Let's end on this one. Lanny, 2 plays decided the outcome, the DK fumble and the huge return. Indeed, that got him down into touchdown territory, and then the 70-yard touchdown. I would argue that David Montgomery run too, because I could have really changed that drive. And I'd have to go back again and look at, exactly what drive that was, because that's not at the forefront of my brain right now. But I just remember, I think I even tweeted it, like, that's a game changer. That play was a game changer, really flipped the field. I think that was early third quarter, wasn't it? So, yeah. Let me just end on this. I get as emotional as anyone. And there were moments in this game when I allowed myself to think, we can beat this team. We can beat this team today with the roster, the players we have on hand. And yes, we could have. We would have had to play closer to a perfect game, or at least a much cleaner game. Made a tackle here or there. Not turn the ball over. Tighten some things up in coverage. But I think that speaks volumes to where this team is after 4 games. By the way, just a little teaser on Wednesday. My old friend and former co-host Dana O'Gorman will be joining me to give her thoughts on this game and kind of take a look at the team through 4 games, which, we can't really call it the quarter poll anymore because of the stupid odd numbered game that they added on to the end, but you get the idea. The first quarter of the season, I think it's important. It's a good time to do a reset heading into the Giants game at home. I also think it's important to note that this team and this coaching staff and this front office, it's pretty clear that they understand where they're at also. And that they're looking at the big picture and not just what's right in front of them. And that is why all these guys missed the game today. Mike McDonald said it himself. If it had been the Super Bowl, different story. I suspect Leonard Williams could have played. You can shoot those ribs up, put a flak jacket on him. I suspect Uchenna Nwosu or Boye Mafe certainly could have played, because we're not talking about ligament damage in his case. Maybe even Chenna could have played. But they see what's coming. They see a Giants team coming in on Sunday to play in front of what I am sure is going to be a rabid home crowd that is starting to sense that this team can be something, against a team that has talent but isn't one of the elite teams in the NFC. I'm sure the Seahawks will be, I would imagine that they would be a similar favorite to what they were an underdog in Detroit, maybe, somewhere between 5 and 6.5 points. That we will all look at this game on Sunday as a game they should win. And in that sense, coming off of such a matchup like this against one of the elite teams, shall we say, in the NFC, that it's a game that they should win. And maybe now that you have sharpened your steel a little bit more, let's go into that game, and that'll tell us a lot too. Let's not just eke out a win, but let's say they put a pretty convincing win together against the Giants next week. Then you get the 49ers coming in here on Thursday, and hopefully we have more of our horses. Some of these guys could have played tonight and would have made a difference, even at less than 100% health. But they're looking ahead. And not that they were conceding this game. Certainly, if you listen to Mike McDonald and the sound that I played on my show last night on the live show and watched any of his press conferences this week, especially the last one on Saturday, he was confident. He liked his depth. He liked the guys he had. He thought they had a good plan in place. They weren't conceding this game. That's not what I'm saying at all. They thought they could win with the guys they had on hand and then make sure that when they get these other defenders back, that they're 100% ready to go. So just keep thinking about what Greg Bell said. This isn't the team that it's going to be in November. And what I hope to see out of this game, and I suspect is going to happen, is this team's going to come out better for it. I mean, you talk about now the ammunition this coaching staff has to go sit into meetings and break this film down with players and go, okay, now here's how this coverage looks against a really good quarterback with a couple of, big time wide receiver talents. Here's how this run fit needs to look against a team with an elite offensive line, even without Ragnow in there, and an elite running back pair. This is how it needs to look. So now you go play a Giants team with Daniel Jones at quarterback and Devin Singletary at running back. And you put those into action. It'll be interesting to see as the week goes along if any of those guys are borderline, if they hold them out one more game. I'd be surprised if they all miss the game again. I'd be shocked if they all miss the game again. But I'd kind of be surprised if all 5 of them play too. So we'll kind of have to see how that goes. Yeah, guys, really, really love. There's almost 500 of you in the live stream right now. Really, really enjoy this. Thanks for the engagement. Thanks for the support. Again, if you want to support the show, down below. May or may not hop on tomorrow. I'll listen in on Mike McDonald's coach's show on Cairo 710, see if there's anything worth reacting to, maybe do something just kind of brief, maybe just do a quick live. But certainly be back with Dana on Wednesday. And then also want to do a quarter poll check-in, and I'll shoot for Friday on this one. We'll also do a proper preview of the Giants game at some point this week. But I'm going to reset and do a schedule prediction now that we have more data, now that we have a larger sample size. We have 4 games in the bank. Now let's take a look at the schedule. This could be kind of fun. The last 13 games remaining, and kind of go week to week and pick and see how we think this team. I didn't do that at the beginning of the season this year because it was just too hard to tell what we had on our hands. Although I did say on the record, this feels like an 11-win team. We know a lot more about some of these teams. And in the NFC, there's a lot of surprises. There's a lot of 2-2 and 1-3 teams that we're supposed to contend. So we'll do that as well. Let's finish on a high note. Adam says, hey man, you do a great job. Thanks for the podcast. Thanks to all of you for listening, watching, all of that. And let's end with some metal. I am Dan. Let's get this up here for those of you visual learners. At Seahawks Forever on Twitter. And tell me what you think in the comments down below. If you didn't get to watch this live, if you're catching up to it after the fact, your thoughts on the game. What do you think I missed? Any kind of underlying storylines that you picked up on that you want to talk about? And then tune in again on Wednesday at the latest for Dana O'Gorman hopping back on the show. We'll get the field goals band back together. Until then, forever and always, go Hawks. They're still 3-1. Still in first place, a game up over the San Francisco 49ers. Not a bad place to be after 4 weeks. Till next time.